Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Emma. I thought today I would film my classics collection, or basically going over all of the classics that I own, because I recently rearranged the library situation, as you can see. So I thought, well, I literally had all the classics I own on the floor below you. I thought it would be a good time to go over all of them, show you guys what classics I have. I love watching people's classics collection. 90% of all the books I own are thrifted. That's basically how I acquire all of my books. I love going thrift shopping for books. However, that means that my collection of classics is a very mish-mashed, strange variety of random editions, weird copies, and really some of them are pretty cursed, let's be honest, but I thought it'd be fun to go through all of them. I'm just gonna start with the biggest number of books I have in one edition. So yeah, I think I'm probably gonna run down all of the collections that I have at least more than 2 copies of a book in, if that makes sense. And then at the end, I'll go through the very strange mumbo jumbo random pile of editions that I have only one of. So I think I'm just gonna start with the Penguins. So let us begin. All right, so the oldest Penguins I have are these guys. I'm not sure what edition. This is just the Penguin Black Classics, but I think these ones are literally from the 60s. Oh my gosh. Yes, the late 50s, early 60s are what these editions came from, I guess. The first one I have is Tacitus's The Annals of Imperial Rome. I had to get this for school actually, and once again I found all of these at a thrift store, which is great. The good old days when books cost $2.95. I also have Ovid's Metamorphoses in this edition. I have Aristophanes, Lysistrata, the Acharnians, and the Clouds, which are 3 plays. So these are like classical studies related, because the next one I have is Aeschylus and his plays Prometheus Bound, The Suppliants, 7 Against Thebes, and The Persians. This edition cost $1.25 when it was first printed, and now the translation of Aeschylus I have today that I got in like 2019 cost 30 bucks. So inflation, ladies and gentlemen. Next in my Penguin editions, I have a few that are a bit later than those 50s and 60s guys. I think these are the Penguin Black editions from like the 70s maybe. Let me grab them. Okay, these are from the 70s, you can tell because the price is going up. Okay, the first one I have here is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. First of all, I just want to say all of these have the strangest smell to them, and also like I hate how small the text is. I think I'm probably just gonna say my feelings straight up on the specific editions, but I am not a fan of these ones. They're like almost mass market paperbacky. Anyway, this is the first one I have. I guess I'll also say too if I've read them or not. So the next one I have here is The Quest of the Holy Grail, the classic Arthurian legends. I have not yet read this. I actually really enjoy the buttery, what would you call this? Beige pale. This next one I have read, and that is Voltaire by Candide. It's just a little edition of Voltaire's classic satire. I read this back in January and I really enjoyed it. Very strange commentary, which I really loved. So that is Voltaire. Next up, we have a very battered copy of Collected Poems by Arthur Rimbaud, which I have not yet read. This is the lovely edition which comes with the French on one side, English on the other. I do mean to read this pretty soon. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. So that is Collected Poems. Moving into some more classical studies works, because I've just decided to group them all together. We have Sophocles, the 3 Theban plays, Antigone, Oedipus the King, and Oedipus at Colonus. I have read all of these, absolutely love them. It was great. I actually do really love the cover designs on these old ones. I think they're really just nice, simple. The last 2 buttery popcorn colored background books I have. We have Lives of the Later Caesars. We're not sure who wrote this. No one knows. If you want to do your PhD on it, go for it. I have read this. I had to read this for my classical studies class. One of them really enjoyed this. I love the artwork that these covers choose. I think they're stunning. So that is Lives of the Later Caesars. And finally, the last one I have here in the buttery color is Fall of the Roman Republic, which I have read and which I really loved as well. So the 3 black editions I have in these ones, I have Euripides, the Bacchae, and other plays. I have not yet read this, but this is like super at the top of my Greek plays that I want to read. I've wanted to get into this for such a long time, so that is the first one I have. Next up, I have Apollonius of Rhodes and his The Voyage of Argo. And the last little Penguin classic I have in these old editions is Beowulf, the translation by Michael Alexander. I have read this. I had to read this for my British literature class. Really strangely, this has someone's phone number on the front cover. Monica, if you're out there, what are you doing leaving your phone number in books? I don't know. I really love this. I really like how this looks as well. So that is Beowulf. Okay, and finally moving on to the modern Penguin Black classics that we all know and love. I have probably the most of these guys, I believe. In no particular order, I have the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which I have not yet read. Quite chunky, but I've looked through a lot. So interesting. It comes with obviously a lot of chapters and sections and parts. So that is the first one I have. This next one I have read, and that is Plato's Symposium. I read this back in, I think, February. Really ended up loving a lot of it. There's so many cool ideas in here, so that is Plato's Symposium. Next up, we have Sallust, Catiline's War, the Jugurthine War, and Sallus's Histories. I haven't touched upon this at all, but he's here. I have Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, his poetry, which I have read. I think I read this in high school. Absolutely loved it. Phenomenal. I'm definitely due for a reread, and I want to annotate the whole thing. I think I dog-eared a few of the pages, but I would love to just get into this so much more now because high school was eons ago, thank God. That is Leaves of Grass. Smells like a vacuum cleaner. It is The Idiot by Dostoevsky. I don't know why this coffee smells like the inside of a vacuum cleaner. Mildly concerning, but that's okay. I haven't read this coffee. I found it at a thrift store. Once again, I've heard so much about The Idiot, and having only read Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, I would love to get into the rest of his work. So that is also on the top of my Russian classics TBR, I suppose. I have the absolutely massive copy of Edmund Spenser's The Fairy Queen. She is thick, not Elizabeth, the book itself. Maybe Elizabeth was thick, I don't know. Okay. I bought this because we were reading a few books of this for my Renaissance literature course. The few sections of it I read, I believe we read books 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or something like that. I loved. I didn't really think I was going to get along with it. I've never really shown much interest in Renaissance literature, but once you kind of get introduced to it and take a class about it, it becomes so much more interesting, and that's what happened with The Fairy Queen. I would love to someday read this whole expansive volume. So that is The Fairy Queen. I also just think this is stunning. She's stunning. Next, I have Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Women, Mary Shelley's mama. I have read bits and pieces of this for, again, a class I took, but I haven't read the whole thing, so I would love to do that at some point. I have The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. You guys know I recently read We Have Always Lived in the Castle, which became like probably a new favorite, honestly, so I'm very excited to get into The Haunting. And finally, the last two I have here are The Lady of the Camellias by Alexandre Dumas fils. I haven't read this either, but I have heard so many people have recommended this book to me. So many people have said I would absolutely adore this text, so that is that one. And the last book I have in the Penguin Black Classics is Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton. I have read this book. This is a tremendously sad, little depressing story that I don't know if I ever want to read again, to be honest, because it's not a fun time at all, but that is Ethan Frome. All right, my next biggest collection, I guess, is the Arcturus editions. I've never seen anyone else with these editions. I don't know if it's strictly a Canadian thing or if I've just never seen anyone else have them. It's the one with the little constellation of the bear on them. These ones, I will say, I adore these covers. They're so unique and different from each other, so inventive. I love the cover designs. However, I'm not a fan of the text inside, specifically the spacing and the font. We're getting really into specifics here, but if I don't like a font that a book is written with, let me just run them down really quickly. The first one I have is The Iliad by Homer. This is what I mean. These designs are just absolutely stunning. I love them so much. Each comes with like such like a design that is fitted to the story and the content and the genre, and I love these editions on the outside. So next I have The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, which I have not yet read, the classic ghost story. Once again, these covers. I have two here that I have read. That is The Professor by Charlotte Bronte. I read this, I think, last summer. I mildly enjoyed it. I'm definitely more interested in, obviously, the other works of Charlotte, so that is The Professor. And then I have The Prince by Machiavelli, so I have read this as well. I just mentioned this, and that is We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I adored this, and this is such a stunning cover as well. I have De Profundis, or From the Depths by Oscar Wilde, which is beautiful, and I have not yet read. I really, really want to. This is at the top of my Oscar Wilde works that I want to read, so that is that one. I have The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This is also such a stunning edition. Obviously I read this. This is one of my favorite books ever, so yeah. I have Beyond Good and Evil. I have The Lovecraft Compendium by H.P. Lovecraft. I have Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert, which I read a while ago. I found this book tremendously, tediously boring. I don't know if I would feel the same if I read it now, and I know that's a little bit of the point with this book, but that is Madame Bovary. And then finally, I have 3 of Arcturus's, I don't know what to call these. I think these might be the older editions of classics. I have Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, read, loved, insane. I have Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. And finally, I have The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I also have one hardback in the Arcturus editions, and that is Short Stories by H.P. Lovecraft. This one is so beautiful. So stunning. Oh my gosh. I have only read a few short stories from here, so I'm kind of waiting until Halloween to get into the rest of them. All right, the last collection of Penguin editions that I have are the Penguin English Library, so I'll just fire through those really rapidly. I have 2 of the very old Penguin English Library editions. They're falling apart, they're yellowing, and they smell like something in your grandma's closet. Okay, the first one is Charles Darwin's The Origin of Species, and the other one I have here, the last one, is Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I've read Sense and Sensibility. I've read most of The Origin of Species. I don't love reading it from these editions because, once again, the text will make you need to have glasses for the rest of your life. So those are those 2 guys. However, I also own some of the newer, nicer editions in the Penguin English Library. I have Dracula by Bram Stoker. Ooh, okay. I have A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. And finally, the last Penguin English Library I have, for now, is A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, which I haven't read. Alright, so now moving into some other editions, some other random strange editions of which I have only like 2, 3, 4, 5 copies of. I'm gonna start with the Dover thrift editions. All of these are thrifted, so look at that. The first one I have in these editions, I don't love these editions, let's just put that out there, is the Oresteia trilogy by Aeschylus. I've read this, love it. The Oresteia is probably my favorite Greek play. It might be my favorite play of all time. This comprises Agamemnon, the Libation Bearers, and the Furies. That is Aeschylus. I have a very strange Dover thrift edition. This one is The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. Someone was just like, what part of your cover do you want to be green? And the designer was like, yes. This is actually a green edition though, so it's concerned and focused on being an environmentally friendly made book, which is unbelievably cool. I love that so much. However, it looks hideous, but that's okay. I loved The Island of Dr. Moreau. It is my favorite H.G. Wells novel that I've read. Highly recommend. So spooky, so strange, mad scientist, insane. I've actually read all of my Dover thrift editions. The next one I have is Lady Windermere's Fan by Oscar Wilde, which is a very short little play. And finally, the last one I have is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, which I have read as well, and this is a green edition too. All right, moving on to the Barnes and Noble Classics editions, which I guess I must have had shipped to me from Thrift Books because we don't have Barnes and Noble here. The first one I own is the collected poems of Emily Dickinson in the Barnes and Noble editions. I dislike these vehemently. I think they're so ugly. I don't know, all of the ones I have, just it ain't it, but that is Emily Dickinson. Next up, I have Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Did I say prejudice correctly? I think I said prejudice. Anyway, yeah, I just don't love these. They're not nice to read. I'm thinking of getting some of these classics I own in maybe the Penguin English Library editions or something, because I have read Pride and Prejudice. I've absolutely loved it, obviously, but yeah. The last Barnes & Noble classic I have is a hardback edition of Paradise Lost by John Milton, which 5 stars, one of my favorite books, poems, whatever. Yeah, love it. This guy has his edges deckled. Yeah, that's the last one I have. I have 2 crumbling editions in the Premier Classics copies of classics. The first one is Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, which is just coming apart, honestly. This is a disaster. I have read this, absolutely loved it. This was my introduction to Dickens and it was marvelous. So that is that guy. The other copy I have in the Premier Classics is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I have 2 copies of Wuthering Heights. This one isn't my favorite. Like, the spacing on the page is just kind of strange. I don't know. These are very specific complaints, but here we are. Moving on to some editions I really love. It is the Oxford World Classics editions. I have 2 of their very old ones. I have 2 of their very old copies of Anne Radcliffe. I have the Italian. This smells like the inside of like a gumball vending machine or something. It's like a very sweet oaky afterbirth, you know. Anyway, so that is the Italian. Next up I have The Mysteries of Udolpho, also by Anne Radcliffe. These are almost like unreadable. The print is so tiny, and I did actually struggle my whole way through this Gothic novel last summer. I adored it, but the physical task of reading specifically from this edition was enormous, an enormous undertaking. So that is The Mysteries. I have 3 of the Oxford World Classics in their a bit later editions. So I have The Flowers of Evil by Charles Baudelaire. I love this. Loved it. Cover design, fabulous. I also have the 4 comedies of Plautus, which I haven't yet read. And then finally I have Suetonius's Lives of the Caesars, which is just a fabulous work of maybe a little bit magnified documentary of the Roman emperors, and I loved it. So much scandal, so much weird wacky stuff going on. Suetonius is such an entertaining writer, to say the least, even though he may not be 100% factual, but Lives of the Caesars was a really fun time. Finally, I have the really nice revamped Oxford World Classic editions in their modern format, and I have The Monk by Matthew Lewis. I have Euripides' other plays, Medea, and some other ones, including Hippolytus, Electra, and Helen. Finally, I have Tolstoy's big boy, War and Peace, which I haven't yet read, which I want to read this immediately, but I think it's going to take me quite a long time. But that is War and Peace. This is absolutely beautiful. Also in the modern iterations, I have 3 classical studies works. I have The Rise of Rome, books 1 to 5 by Livy. I have 6 tragedies by Seneca, and I have The Republic and Letters by Cicero. Okay, I think next up I'm going to talk about the Signet classic editions. I really don't like these. They're so tiny, so hard to read. I know, I just have small eyeballs. The first one I have is Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. I have read this. This was hard to read. Makes you feel so bad, but I really enjoyed it. I would love to reread it, honestly. Next up, I have the very sweet Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. This was such a fond, strange, nightmarish book, honestly, from my childhood, and I finally got to read it because previously I think I only had a picture copybook of it in the very strange VCR movie with Toad, who gave me nightmares when I was little, but that is The Wind in the Willows. I have The Fall of the House of Usher and Other Tales by Edgar Allan Poe. I have read this, absolutely love Edgar Allan Poe. He's my main ho. And then I have Great Dialogues of Plato. This comes equipped with The Republic, The Apology, Crito, and other stuff. Obviously the Symposium is in here too. So I have read a bit of this, but not the whole thing in its entirety, and that's the last Signet classic that I have. I have 3 of Shakespeare's plays in the Folger Shakespeare Library editions. I have The Merchant of Venice, I have Macbeth, and I also have A Midsummer Night's Dream, which I am currently reading. I have 3 copies in the, what is this? Is this the, I think this is the vintage classics, whatever that means. I have the Aeneid by Virgil. This is the Robert Fitzgerald translation. I have Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. And finally, I have Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. I have 3 classics in the, I think this is the Faber and Faber editions. I have William Golding's Pincher Martin, which I've read. This is a super crazy book. I also should probably mention that I didn't descend into modern classics in this classics collection. I might do one of those videos later, but I think the last work I have is probably the bell jar for chronology. I think that's the last book. I think I just cut it off in the 1950s. I don't love the like, I don't know, splitting off and cordoning off and like separation and what really constitutes a classic. I could go on this whole rant, but that's Pincher Martin. And then finally in the Faber and Faber, I have 2 T.S. Eliot. I have The Cocktail Party, a play that I've never seen anyone else mention in my whole entire life. And I have his collected poems from 1909 to 1962. I've read pretty much almost all of this copy, I believe. I have a few poems I haven't got to yet, but I mean to very shortly. And then I have a few editions in the Wordsworth classics. I have one of their really old ones. It is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I did obviously buy the new Penguin English Library edition of Dracula because I read this and it's falling apart. It smells like it's falling apart. Guys, I just have really weirdly smelling books. I'm just gonna be honest. That's Dracula. I have a few of their newer ones. I've read almost all of these. I have Anna Karenina in the Wordsworth Classics by Tolstoy. This was such... I do really like these strange editions. I really do. So there's Anna Karenina. Like the paper is very soft. I have the Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I had to read this for uni as well. I really detested this novel. I did not get along with it at all. I found it... I'm not gonna... You know what? Whatever. This isn't a book review. I just have it. Didn't like it at all. And then I have Emma by Jane Austen. I really do like these copies. I think they're really, really nice looking. So soft. I don't know why I keep saying that. Very floppy. And yeah, I don't know if Wordsworth Classics has published any like new collections. I'm sure they have. I just really don't go hunting for them because I just enter a thrift shop and then kind of whatever's there is whatever's there, you know? All right, the last edition I have is a poetry library of the Wordsworth Library, and that is the works of John Keats, which is very battered but still held together with love. And I have 3 copies from, I think this is Scribner. Is this Scribner? Yes, the Scribner Library. First up, I have In Our Time by Ernest Hemingway. Haven't read it. I have The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. Haven't read it. And I have Tender Is the Night by F. Scott Fitzgerald, which I also haven't read. Apparently this one made it all the way to me from the Palmetto Bay, Miami-Dade Public Library from Miami, Florida. So thank you. I have 2 editions in kind of classics at least. I love the Modern Library classic editions. I think they're just very like professional, robust editions. I have a lot of, for example, David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas and a whole bunch of other ones are from the Modern Library. I love these editions. I love them so much. So first up, I have King Lear in this edition. I love these editions. They tell you so much. There's so much space. It's a nice font. No complaints. The other one I have in the Modern Library is Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, and Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs. This is the version with 2 of them together. And once again, these are just such really, really nice editions. Love them. I also have 2 editions in the Harper Perennial Modern Classics editions, yes. I have The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I read this back in high school, which might have been a mistake, but I would love to get back into this. I'm so due for a reread, so that is The Bell Jar. And the other edition I have in here is Homer's Odyssey. Not really sure if I love this cover, but there it is. This is the translation by Richmond Lattimore. I have 2 of the strangest editions of Thucydides and Polybius. This is the, what the hell is this? Washington Square Press book. These 2 copies, here they are. I found these at this big book, abandoned, empty warehouse up north in the Canadian Moose Country when I went to a cottage. This smell on both these books. I wish we had like sensory nose capabilities on YouTube, but basically they're so yellowed. I don't know if you can see that. They've got chunks taken out of them by who the hell knows what. They smell like a combination of maple syrup very strong pine trees, maybe a little bit of moose droppings I'm detecting, and it's incredible. It's really incredible. I don't know if I'm ever gonna read this. Like, they are just falling apart, absolutely falling apart. But I saw them there, and they look like they haven't been touched for longer than I've been alive, so I picked both of them up. Very, very interesting. I very fond memories. I haven't read either of them yet, but I do mean to. So that is Thucydides, obviously the Peloponnesian Wars, and the Histories by Polybius. These next three might be like the favorite editions, my favorite editions. These are the Vintage, I think this is the Vintage International. Yeah, Vintage International, wherever you are. Thank you. I love these. Murakami's books are printed by Vintage International. I believe a lot of his editions, and I think they're beautiful. They have like the most beautiful covers. Yeah, I have, if not Winter, Fragments of Sappho, translated by Anne Carson in this edition. I am obsessed. I think this is it's just stunning. I love this cover. I love it so much. They all come with like this very rough, coarse texture. I don't know what I'm doing. This is Sappho. Another beautiful one is Lolita. This is the 50th anniversary edition by Nabokov, and once again, nice. I have read this, and I do mean to do a reread of it soon, so that is Lolita. And finally, the last one I have here is the Japanese classic Snow Country by Yasunari Kawabata. Once again, they're so nice. I think they're so beautiful, and I love them. Okay, Penguin has literally so many different editions that I forgot about. What are these called? The 20th Century Classics, or as I like to call them, the minty green. Not really, but I don't like this color. In this one, I have Early Poems by Edna St. Vincent Millay. I have The Crucible by Arthur Miller. I have Lady Chatterley's Lover by D.H. Lawrence. And I have On the Road by Jack Kerouac. I also have two Lonely Penguin editions that didn't really go with anything. The first one is, of course, The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. You guys know, you all know, we know. This is stunning. I love this. I would just like to own every edition of The Phantom of the Opera ever. One of my favorite books. This next one is so strange. I found this at the sketchiest thrift shop downtown. It's a copy of The Beautiful and Damned by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and it would be a really, really nice, beautiful, shiny penguin classic cover, but there's like a literal blood stain on it. Like that's not cover design. I found it that way at the thrift store. I'm sure this book has a riveting history, but anyway. Okay, we're finally done with all of the books that I have more than one of in their respective editions. So now I'm just going to move into this very strange mish-mashy pile of classics that I own. First up, I have Ovid's Metamorphoses. This is the Indiana University Press edition. I recently got this because this is a new translation by Rolf Humphreys, and I've been meaning to read this for a very long time. I also have Lattimore's translation of Homer's Iliad. I've read a lot of this. This is a really, really good translation in my humble opinion. We had to read this for school, and I loved it. I have Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie in the Bantam Classic edition. I always talk about this cover. It's so funny. She is like polishing a mushroom. Next up, I have Le Petit Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry because we read this in high school, I believe, in my high school French class. Just adore this book. A lot of people talk about The Petit Prince and how much it means to them. It's such a sweet, magical, nostalgic story. So that is that one. I have The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost in the St. Martin's Griffin edition. I have this dusted, battered copy of Selected Poems of Ezra Pound. I have Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. I have Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse. I have this little copy of Yeats's poetry, selected poetry, published by Macmillan. I have Samuel Beckett's Endgame and Act Without Words. This copy smells like cigarette smoke. I love this though, like look at this. Oh my gosh, I found this at a church garage sale, I believe. And there's so many notes in it. I would love to know who owned this. If you are out there and you took very careful, nicely insightful notes on Dylan Thomas's Miscellany 2, A Visit to Grandpa's, and other stories and poems, If you're out there, tell me, because you're probably not alive anymore. Maybe you are. But this whole thing is just riddled with notes and strange little comments in the margins, and I love it so much. This one just says, everybody is a symbol of themselves. Crazy. I have Kafka's Diaries from 1910 to 1913. I have this really, really ugly, I hate this edition. This is probably the least favorite edition of mine. I have The Turn of the Screw by Henry James in the Prestwick House Literary Touchstone Classics. That was a mouthful. And there's also one of my mother's grocery lists in here. We're discovering a lot today. She wanted frozen edamame curry bowl with rice. She wanted cauliflower, and she wanted some spinach, and she wanted some bow tie pasta. Moving on to the last little bunch, I have Selected Letters of Oscar Wilde. I have this really, really, really nice edition of Moby Dick by Herman Melville, which I have not yet read, but it is a very big, beautiful hardback. Sorry, I should just stop inhaling books because they're not meant to be smelled, they're meant to be read. There's so much dust in there. I have this really, really beautiful illustrated double translation edition of Dante's Inferno. This is the one translated by Robert Pinsky. I have the complete poems of Emily Bronte, and obviously someone didn't check their work because we're missing an accent on the E, people. I have this really, really cool, this is the Knickerbocker Classics, that's a fun word, by Washington Irving, of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Other Stories. It comes with this like really cute, I don't know, notebook mimicky format. I have the Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole. This is the only edition in the Everyman Library Pocket Poets edition I have. It's a book of Shelley's poetry. I have Prometheus Unbound by Percy Bysshe Shelley. This is also one of my favorite plays ever, 5 stars. Alright, and finally, the very last book that I've decided to include in this very big classics collection, they're like all on the floor, is this really, really beautiful copy of the Histories of Herodotus. It is falling apart, but I would like to repair it. It's really, really nice. It's really, really nice. The top, they've got like the gold shiny pages, which I love. And it's so ancient, so it's stunning. I love it. This was published in 1956, and here she is. That is the last book in my little, I guess not really little, because classics kind of make up the main component of my library, but those are all of the classics I own, not including modern classics or anything past basically the 1950s. I hope you guys enjoyed. I now have the big task of putting them all back on the shelf. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you're all doing well, and I will see you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Ciao.